Hello, everybody. It's me, Dr. Nicole Montero, Chief Content Creator here at Zen Wanderlust Travel, founder of Zen Wanderlust Travel. You can just call me Nicole, global citizen, world traveler, someone who just is passionate about travel, have been in the travel game for a long time, and want you to get as much as possible out of your travel as you can. So much of that transformation comes from immersing yourself in the culture of wherever you're going, learning, opening yourself up to the experience. So, what I want to talk about today, misconceptions about travel to Africa. So if you can see there, there's a poll where you can answer whether or not you have travel to the continent. Are you planning to? Not yet. You want to, answer my poll so I can see where everybody is. But misconceptions. So I see travel to Africa is becoming more and more popular, and I think that is amazing. Actually, CNN Travel and other sites have listed Ghana as one of the top travel destinations for 2019, not just in Africa. So travel throughout the continent is becoming, is getting on the map. Like you hear about Europe and South America and all of these places, Asia. Different locations on the continent are getting on the map in terms of being top travel destinations, period. But there are a lot of misconceptions that I see that people, when I kind of go into the travel groups and see people writing things. So here's number one. I'll just get straight to it. One is a big misconception is that people do not fully get or understand how diverse the continent of Africa is, the continent. They do not understand the diversity within any one particular country in Africa. The language diversity, the ethnic, racial, ethnic, tribal diversity, the diversity of the terrain in any one country, even climate diversity, customs, culture, right? We tend to think of Africa as one monolithic thing, one thing. Right? But the biggest misconception is how diverse it is. So first of all, when you say you want to go to Africa, where? What region? East, west, north, south? The Horn of Africa? Sub-Saharan Africa? Where do you want to go? Do you want to, but then choosing a country. What country do you want to go to and why? And this is, anytime you hear me talk about travel, I am going to talk about doing your research. Do your research. Where do you want to go? Why? Find out a little bit about the history, about what are the main cultures and ethnic groups and languages spoken? What is the colonial history? Many countries throughout the world, not just on the continent of Africa, have been colonized, right? So understand what is the pre-colonial history. Do your research. Figure out why you want to go to a place. What is the connection you have? For a lot of people in the African diaspora, now people are traveling because they're getting access to, they want to connect to their roots. And they do their DNA test and they find out that they have a certain percentage of ancestry from a certain country or a region. And we know that the historical regions don't match current sort of boundaries that have been set up. So your ancestry results might say you're from Nigeria, but it might not be overlap exactly with present day Nigeria, right? But just pick a region and understand why you want to go and why you want to go to a particular country, and then start to do your research so you can understand the diversity. When I say that people, one misconception is that people don't understand diversity. They see Africa as one thing. One thing. They have one image, whether it's a rural image, whether it's an image, a historical image of great kings and queens and empires, whether it's an image that is monolithic, where they just see, one type of language or one type of tribe. The biggest misconception about Africa is that it is a monolith. Not understanding that the greatest diversity of human DNA exists in the continent of Africa. And that makes sense because that's the birthplace of humanity. So all of the diversity within our human DNA, it emanates from the continent. And while the continent of Africa is the home of so many amazing, great historical civilizations and societies and cultures that have contributed to the world, you have to understand present day Africa too, as an amalgamation of historical greatness as well as, the drain of resources that have happened over, in modern history from colonialism and so forth. And so understanding that will help you to be able to better adapt to situations and conditions that you might encounter when you travel to present day Africa. You go to any one country. I lived in Ethiopia for a year. It's an amazing place because of the history. The history, Ethiopia was never colonized. There was a time when the Italians tried to come in and they were fought back. The Battle of Adwa. Ethiopia is an amazing country with so much history, so much diversity. People only kind of think about the Amhara as the representation of Ethiopia. You have the Tigrinya, you have other smaller groups that border on South Sudan, groups that have more similarity to parts of going towards the Great Lakes region of Africa, the Oromo, you have the Harar, you have the Omo people, you have so many different groups with different cultures and different ways of life, right? That's just within one country. So we've got to expand our view and understand, and then also languages, right? So if you go to a country, for example, if you go to, many of you know, I was living in Botswana in Southern Africa. And the mode of instruction and teaching and so forth is English, the official sort of governmental language. But then there's Setswana. But you also have other groups that border on near Zimbabwe. You have groups that border near Namibia. So you have so much ethnic diversity and cultural diversity, although they're similar, but each ethnic group and cultural group has their own history of migration, own language history, own slightly different nuanced cultural differences. So when you talk about a country, you've also got to talk about the diversity within the cultural diversity within that country. The other thing is because Africa, the continent, has suffered from so much drain of its resources despite its historical glory, people tend to only then see it in that extreme. So I see extremes. People either only see Africa as like its historical greatness or its current day struggles as a result of those resource drains. And so people only I saw somebody write something about Kenya Airways. People don't know that some of the best airlines in the world are African airlines. Kenya Air is an amazing airline. South Africa Air, I've flown them numerous times, great airline. Ethiopian Air that suffered that horrible crash because of the Boeing, not because of the airline. Some of the best trained pilots are Ethiopian airline pilots. And it was sad when that airline crash happened that people were talking about downing, thinking automatically because it was an African airline that was the problem, when actually it was because of Boeing and the FAA not regulating that new 737 MAX airplane, right? So you have also some of the most educated people in the world. You know where they are at? In Africa. I've taught at higher education, university levels. My colleagues were top notch and taught me more than I've learned in many cases, in some things in the States and in Western countries. The level of highly educated, entrepreneurial, multilingual, bi and tricultural people in many countries in Africa will astound you, right? So you got to get that misconception out of your head. You got to shake it up a little bit. And not everything is about race. People, a lot of times I see a lot of African diaspora people want to go to the continent and get mad because they feel like they're not welcome, because nobody just sees you as just a Black man. Identity is not purely or singularly or only based on race. Okay, so you got to understand that. That's kind of a brainwashing, a Western brainwashing, that the whole of who you are should be based on the color of your skin, right? Somebody doesn't, if you what's the book, Americana by Adichie? You know, she didn't know she was black, or that when they found out that her father was in her life, is like, wow, a black father. And she's like, but that wasn't something that I had to really contend with as part of my identity in Nigeria, right? So identity is based on a whole, you know, different set of criteria that's not just racial. So don't expect that you're only going to be, you know, everything is about being black or the color of your skin. That's, you know, so that's another misconception. Another thing, I had written some things down. Oh, just on a practical level, this thing with these vaccines, you know, don't let this anti-vaxxer thing mix you up and have your travel messed up, right? You need to do your research. There are certain countries. So this is the thing about travel. There are some things, some vaccines or some things that you need as a requirement to go to certain countries. So in parts of West Africa, or if you go to parts of Southern Africa or other parts of Africa, after having come from West Africa, you do need to show proof of yellow fever vaccine. That's just a requirement. Doesn't matter if you agree with vaccines or not. Right? So you need to research whether or not the country you're going to requires that. And then you need to get it. And then outside of the required vaccines, which for, if we're talking about parts of Africa, might be yellow fever, then there are a set of recommended prophylaxis or vaccines that you might need to consider. So if you're going to a place during malaria season, which is usually the rainy season, in places where malaria is endemic, then you might want to consider, you can do the natural thing if you want to, but you might want to consider whether or not you want to do some sort of preventative, they call it prophylaxis for malaria. That includes Lariam, also doxycycline. You can do, people have talked about neem, which is a type of herbal thing, or you can just be very precautious in terms of making sure you sleep with a mosquito net if you're going to be in a place where there are a lot of mosquitoes, making sure that you wear long sleeves, or if you're around sitting or standing water, that you spray mosquito spray on you, right? You could take those precautions. All I'm saying is just don't act like it's not a big deal. My daughter did a science project, and a science thing, and they were saying, what is the most dangerous animal or thing in the world? And it's an insect, because of the illnesses and viruses that it carries, including dengue fever and things like that. So you want to just kind of know what you're getting into, but just know what's required and then also what's recommended. Might be hepatitis A, which there are outbreaks of hepatitis A in the States. It's like foodborne illness. So, it's up to you. You don't have to get everything, but know what's required, so you don't have to be sent back on the plane or be in an airport, somebody's airport, and they stick you with a needle because you have to get that vaccine before you come in. The other thing is visa status. Check your visa status. I have had people, I've seen so many posts, and I go over this in the Zen Wanderlust Travel A to Z online master course. It goes over everything you need. Check how to check your visa status and how to apply for a visa. A lot of people don't understand, when you apply, you have to send your passport. Your passport has to have a certain number of pages, free pages. You have to have a certain number of months of your passport being valid, usually for most places 6 months from the date of the visa. So you got to, don't just jump on getting that plane ticket. You've got to research your visa requirements. Some places are easier than others. Ghana, you just send it in. Guinea, you have to, give a reason. It's a little more expensive. Senegal, you get it right when you arrive. Botswana, you can get it when you arrive. It depends on the place. Also, you always want to check up. You might have gone and traveled to a place 10 years ago, but things have changed. So you always want to do your research on that. But there's just this misconception that you can just go anywhere in Africa and you don't need to check the visa, because as if none of the countries in Africa have autonomy or requirements for people to come in like any other country, right? So you want to get that stuff straight. Another thing is, everybody heard about this. This wasn't in Africa. This was in Dominican Republic. But this applies in terms of understanding road conditions and safety conditions. Any place you go in the world is more like what they might categorized as a developing country. And all that really means is that certain parts of the infrastructure, because of, the country still sort of developing its economy and things like that, certain things specifically within the physical infrastructure might not be as intact. So with road conditions, one of the highest causes of death throughout the world is road traffic accidents. And that's also within parts of Africa. If you've ever been to Egypt, I think the most scariest place I've ever been in a vehicle or even walking as a pedestrian has been Egypt, because of how people drive, the tailgating. It's just something you have to understand. So before you think you're just going to go and rent a car, just understand, do your research, ask around, try to get a sense of what the road conditions are like, driving culture, and whether or not you can handle it. Going back to the first misconception, which is the diversity within the continent and then within any particular country. I've traveled to about 15 countries in Africa. I was trying to list, I think it's 16. And I'm trying to get to every single country on the continent. But the pure diversity in terms of the ways of life that you will encounter. So we've all seen those memes where they say, this is the Africa they don't want you to see, which is the tall buildings, the downtown, the developed, the skyscrapers, the new development, the high class neighborhoods and the fancy cars. You'll see all of that, right? You'll see the emerging sort of like the nouveau riche and also the development that's going on. You can also go to smaller remote areas and experience village life with the smaller communities where people still might live in thatched huts or still live very communally, and not necessarily have access to all of the, round the clock electricity and all of those things, but you can experience that way of life and still see the level of humanness and connection and collectivism and sense of respect for life and for relationships. You can experience that, right? So you can see the whole gamut. You can see the in-between. You can see the smaller towns that still have some of the modernity, but still have some of the other parts that are not as, that are still like the traditional parts, right? So it's up to you what you want to experience. It is no one thing. It's no one thing. It's up to you what you want to experience. The other misconception is, I think all the misconceptions just go back to this idea of seeing the continent as a monolith and not understanding, you will go there and be amongst your peers, and you will be amongst people that can teach you a lot about technology, about entrepreneurship, about activism and politics, about identity, about race, about history. And that's the sad thing. Most people, and I'm talking now to an audience of people who might be in the US or other Western countries, most people around the world know so much more about you than you know about them, right? And people are just honored when you go somewhere and you study and you meet them, you meet people, local residents, and you show them that you understand a little bit about the history. You've studied, you've taken some time. You're not just there to do, squad goal travel pictures and Black travel movement and all that. You're there to connect, and you're there to show that you took some time to learn and understand. You're there to show that you learned some phrases. And the Travel A to Z, the Zen Wanderlust Travel A to Z online course, we actually have travel small language lessons in Wolof, in Pular, and in French. Imagine if you can go to somebody, you go to Senegal and you say Nangadef, or you go to Botswana and you try to speak Setswana, you say Dumela. You go to Ethiopia and you try to speak a little Amharic. And Deminish, Dananish. You go to, let me see, do I know any Susu? You go to Guinea and you try to say Arabakadi. You go anywhere, you just have that one phrase and people will just open up, or you let them know that you took some time to understand, and you go and you allow yourself to experience the food, and you don't get caught up in, whether or not you can eat this or you can eat that. You go fully prepared to connect with people. That is the most powerful travel. And especially if you're going to Africa, a lot of people going to Africa because they want to reconnect to their roots. They want to reconnect with the mother of all civilization, for all of us as humans. And so to do that, the best way to do that is, yes, you can get your pictures and go to your monuments and your historical places, but you know what? The best way is to meet people, and you will find that you will meet people who are more welcoming than you could ever imagine. People that will sit and make you a cup of tea and insist that you all sit and chat, even though they weren't expecting to see you. They never knew you existed, and somehow you showed up, or someone brought you to them, and they're really, really ready to sit and connect with you, right? So if you could take that with you on your travels, do your research, find out about your vaccines, your visas, all of that stuff, understand that you will learn so much from so many people wherever you go in Africa. Understand that Africa has got a lot going on with these airlines. I couldn't believe it when I saw a post where somebody said, comparing Kenya Air to the Spirit Airlines of Africa. I'm like, what? Kenya Air is one of the top airlines, highly renowned. Ethiopian, like I said, if you want to get a pilot, get an Ethiopian Airlines trained pilot, right? So get kind of these misconceptions. Yes, Africa has been robbed and pillaged by colonialism and development stunted, but don't get it twisted. Do not get it twisted. Do not get it twisted. I'd rather put my life in the hands of an Ethiopian airline trained pilot than any other pilot. They even get hired. I've flown Emirates and what's the other? Emirates and I forgot. It's so many. I love Qatar Air. Yes, thank you, Rasta. That you get a lot of Ethiopian pilots that are hired all over the world. Even Cape Verdean Airlines, small airlines. Cape Verdean Airlines. I've flown. I love the hospitality. I flew. Cape Verde is a small archipelago of islands off the west coast of Africa. Different islands. You have to either take a ferry or a small short plane ride between islands. When I flew from Praia to Sal, from Santiago to go to Sal, just like 45 minutes, you got on the plane. They gave us like these great sandwiches, these great homemade nice tuna sandwiches. And no, we didn't have to pay for it. It was part of the fare. Like, you still get that hospitality on the African airlines. So, let's just spread the word. Let's encourage people to travel. Sometimes you might feel more comfortable. There's so many tours. The Zen Wanderlust tour, Africa tour is coming up soon, so stay tuned to that. But stay tuned for that. But you will get a lot of people wanting to go. Sometimes for you, it might be a tour. Sometimes you can do it solo. Sometimes you might meet somebody that says, come, I want you to visit me in Morocco. Come back home with me. And you can do it. Don't be afraid. Just do your research, open your mind, and go there ready to connect, ready to experience diversity, ready to be changed and transformed, and to learn as much as you think you are going to gain, as much as you think you're going to give. Okay? So let me know what you think. Take the poll. Have you traveled to the continent? Yes, no, or no, and you're planning to really soon? And let me know what you think. All right? This is Dr. Nicole Montero, or just Nicole World Traveler, Chief Content Creator, founder of Zen Wanderlust Travel. And let's stay connected. I want to hear about your travels, not just to Africa, but all over the world. Have a great day.